Hello and welcome. I'm Siddharth Zarabi. On the show today, we focus on trade ties between India and the United Kingdom. Earlier this May, the two nations adopted an ambitious roadmap towards a comprehensive strategic partnership. And later this year, they will begin negotiations for a proposed free trade agreement. And for more on this subject, we are joined today by Richard Hill, the Group Chair of the UK-India Business Council. Welcome on the show, Richard. Let me begin by asking you about the UK IBC's position as far as the FTA is concerned and the 10-year roadmap that has been outlined by both the governments.
I think that what's been outlined by the governments, both governments indeed, is a very ambitious forward plan as far as our trade and economic relations are concerned. In the announcement in May, both Prime Ministers signed up to a doubling of trade between our two countries, somewhere in the region of $50 billion by 2030. And key to that is to sign together and agree together a free trade agreement, but not just a free trade agreement, also looking at other aspects of doing business together as well. We've had a consultancy period here in the UK, which has lasted 14 weeks. We have submitted reports into our Ministry of Commerce, which is the Department of International Trade. That is being examined at the moment by the bureaucrats, and then they will rationalise that, and a mandate will be sought from Parliament, we believe, in the fourth quarter, which will allow the discussions to commence between the government of India and the government of the UK. So it's quite a fast track that we're looking at the moment. And I think that reflects the seriousness which both our governments are approaching this, and certainly has full support of business in the UK, and I believe also business in India.
Since you talk about a fast track approach, as things stand today, by when do you think the India-UK Trade Pact is likely to become reality?
Well, I think that's an extremely interesting question. Clearly, we have certain precedents out there at the moment, most notably the EU-India free trade agreement discussions that have been going on for many years. I think that the approach that we would like to see, and we hear that both governments are discussing, is having an iterative process where there are a series of agreements which come together in time to form a comprehensive free trade agreement. So we're not going to see a kind of, if you like, a big bang of a comprehensive trade agreement at one point. There are certain low-hanging fruits, certain low-hanging agreements that can, and points that can be agreed beforehand, which will come together to create this overarching agreement. So I think it's going to be a process, but we are hopeful that certainly we will see agreements, a full agreement coming through as quickly as possible.
Richard, how have we really done, both nations, in the past few years when it comes to bilateral trade?
Well, to be frank, there is so much more that we should be achieving together. I think that the point that has been made in relation to the collaboration that occurred between the UK and India in the recent unfortunate COVID pandemic that has affected both our countries is a very good example of how we can actually work together. And obviously, the AstraZeneca Serum Institute is a prime example of that. And I think that we should use the developed relationships that have occurred during the past month in order to push forward and to examine areas where we can actually develop very much more. I think both of our economies, both of our countries are very innovative, and we are innovative in areas where there is considerable overlap of experience, both in India and the UK. And I think that these are areas that we should be exploiting. And it comes back to the discussion that we had previously. But these are also areas where we can come to agreements, I think, relatively quickly in order to move forward.
Over the past few years, the Indian government has done a considerable amount of work when it comes to ease of doing business and, dealing with difficulties of doing business like retrospective taxation, which has impacted several UK companies, and those cases are being resolved. Given that entire backdrop, how would you describe the way UK business views the Indian investment climate as we are speaking?
Well, I think you raised an absolutely critical point here. Ease of doing business has been something that has been raised consistently by UK companies who we've been speaking to. And also, interestingly, it has been raised by Indian companies who we've also been interacting with. And I think that that shows the strength of the relationship insofar as ease of doing business is something that is of concern to companies who are already investing, manufacturing, assembling in each other's countries. So it underpins, if you like, the fundamental strength of our relationship. There are areas of where we need to do further progress on improving ease of doing business. I'm very well aware that that India has made significant progress in relation to the World Bank rankings. However, the ambitions of your Prime Minister, and indeed the ambitions of UK companies for the growth of India, is such that you should be much higher in the rankings. And indeed, Prime Minister Modi has made statements to that effect going forward. So we're looking for further improvements as we move forward in areas such as regulation, in areas such as customs, etc. But coming to your specific point, which I think is extremely pertinent, is in another area where we have received comments from UK companies has been around the subject of investor protection and certainty in operating environment going forward. And I think that the recent decisions by the Indian Parliament and the Indian government in relation to the retrospective taxation, and that obviously impacts on Cairn, as well as the changes that have been made in the telecommunications sectors in India, I think has been extremely well received and should be extremely well received. And I think that it gives a high degree of comfort to UK companies, or indeed foreign companies who are wanting to invest in India. The one point I'd also raise in relation to the telecommunication, it relates to the digital environment and digital sector, because one of the fundamental points about the discussions that are going to take place will be looking at how we can develop a better relationship in the digital environment. And one of the areas is the digital infrastructure and the strength and sustainability of a vibrant telecommunications sector. So the statements that have been made, the changes that have been made in relation to that, as they pertain to all the players in the telecommunications sector, is extremely positive.
That's a good point to know, but I'm going to also ask you about the future in terms of the specific business sectors that you think will expand and grow as far as our bilateral trade and business ties are concerned.
Well, the areas where I see major expansion, if you like, the top one on my wish list is in the digital and data services. And I mentioned that for the simple reason that it is an area where both our countries have a lot of complementary strengths and experiences, but it's also one that relates to the future of our industries and our economies across sectors. And therefore, looking at issues around data localization, the treatment of data, artificial intelligence, and as I said, data infrastructure, digital infrastructure, is extremely important. And that goes into areas such as importing and exporting in food and drink, but also in critical social issues like higher education, financial services, financial products, insurance, energy as well, absolutely critical, as well as defense. There really aren't any areas or any sectors where both India and the UK are interested in which is not touched by data. And we are becoming increasingly digitized and digitalized. And that's a trend that has come out of COVID. So I think that looking at that area in the context of other sectors is going to be a very, very important area of interest.
Before I let you go, Richard, one quick and final question, and this is to do with the higher education sector. There's so many students from India who've chosen to study in the United Kingdom, and the UK IBC has done a lot of work on this aspect. Can you expand on this aspect, given the high levels of interest as far as this sector is concerned in India?
Well, I think that higher education is indeed an absolutely fundamental part. I kind of look at the whole sector as being somewhat like an iceberg, that 9/10 of it is below the water and 1/10 is above the water. So if we focus on students coming from the UK, which is the 1/10 above the water, clearly there have been changes in the visa regime here in the UK, which has made it more attractive for Indian students to come and stay and gain experience after they have graduated from their degrees. And that is a positive, and we're already seeing an increase in students coming to the UK, notwithstanding COVID. And we would hope that that situation will improve. The other area that my organization, the UK India Business Council, is very much focused is on that large number of keen and ambitious Indians who wish to avail themselves of foreign learning in India. And we have been making representations to the Indian government around the Foreign Education Providers Bill and legislation, which talks about the top 100 universities. We've been making representations that rather than looking at a university per se, you should be looking at the quality of that education. We've been looking at blended learning techniques, which would allow last mile delivery using Indian infrastructure. We're looking at all sorts of different areas which will allow that large number of Indian students who maybe are not as able to travel abroad to benefit from a foreign education in India.
Well, clearly there's so much that is going well for UK-India trade ties, and one would hope that irritants like the issue around the vaccine certification, which is now in the headlines, is also dealt with. Richard, as always, thank you very much for your time with us today. With that, it's a wrap on this conversation. If you've been, thank you very much for watching.